Hi guys and gals, it's Pete, Mindwiseman's channel, aka Maverick Outdoors, and I've returned to the location that I did my previous Canoe Life Wild Camp, and I'll tell you the reason why in a moment. And I timed actually coming out today, so I didn't actually get caught in the rain, although I don't mind actually paddling, doing any outdoor activity in any weather. It was just the case that I'm only out for 24 hours, so I didn't want to sort of spend half the time I was out being drenched or drying kit and all that sort of thing. So as far as this return location, as you can see, if you've seen my previous video, you'll remember that I actually set up a 3 metre by 2 metre lightweight tarp on this location. But I'm going to use this footprint for a different configuration, hence using those two little sapling uprights just there and there, which actually work out just right. Using a really simple 12 foot by 8 foot plasti tarp, really cheap thing, cost about £12, $15, something like that. So the canoe's unloaded and I've put all the kit out of the way from where the footprint of the basher is going to be. Simple logic really, just so that all the kit is out the way, so I've got space to move around where I'm going to be setting the pitch, all sort of around here, so I want sort of stepping walking space without tripping over kit. But there's a few things to unload from that black rucksack, which I've mentioned before, carries the paddles, the seat, the booster, all that sort of thing, everything that's relevant to the canoe. So although it was separate when I was transiting everything in the car to get to put in, there's a larger bag in there. I mean, it looks, I'm only out for 24 hours, but it looks like a mass of stuff. But in that rucksack, you know, I've got the 5 litres of water, I've got a selection of food, I've got some of the cooking utensils, then the dry bag there in the centre has got the 2 mats, my sleep kit and some change of clothes if I need it, and of course, as I mentioned, in that rucksack previously. So everything's actually relevant, you know, I mean, it's not lightweight backpacking. What I did do, I actually used this. I put this down my back on the inside of my t-shirt, down the back there, and rather than my sort of clean t-shirt that I put on being wet from perspiration, because obviously the material of the personal flotation device, the PFD, is synthetic, so of course, you know, it's going to make you perspire, depending on how long obviously you're paddling for, and obviously out and being active. But I thought what I'd do, I mean, I've used this before as well when I've been trekking and I've had a rucksack on, but it really did the job. And it's sort of going to dry out, but my t-shirt is nice and dry. Well, it's just slightly damp. Obviously there's a bit of transference there onto the t-shirt material, but all in all, my t-shirt is a darn sight more dry than it would normally be. Okay, so I've set up the tarp, and I'll show you actually and explain the actual configuration, why I did it, etc. maybe during the day tomorrow. It's going to be a nice sunny day tomorrow, but I'll just show you briefly just how I've just set everything out inside, sort of admin wise, and sort of like home for the night. As I said, I'll tell you tomorrow when it's sort of in better daylight, because I've got an MRE in a flameless ration heater heating up, and you can just sort of see where I've got everything designated. Here's all the bags as explained earlier, and actually put them in situ to where I'm going to be, and then kit and sundries that I need access to are on the outside edge so I can easily get to them. So my head end has got a steeper fall to it going down, gradient going down, and at least when I'm actually laying down I can sit up and my head is not actually touching the underneath of the tarp. Now in that flat box is my lamb casserole with the flameless ration heater, chemical reaction when you put in about sort of ½ inch of water in this plastic bag and then it just heats through. So that's got about another 5 minutes to go. And I've got my Firebox stove, so I'm not going to actually have a fire pit which I would normally have just over there. Got my Hexamin stove as well, but I think I should be able to source some reasonably dry wood about, so I'm not having to get loads of wood when I'm actually cooking food. I've got some seasoned chicken thighs, 3 of them, so I'm going to set up the grid utility plate which actually goes over the flames, so when the flames die down a bit it sort of gives a sort of barbecue grilling effect. But more about that later on when I'm actually cooking the chicken, and I've also got some dried rice which I'll boil up and rehydrate, so that's going to be my late night evening meal. Meanwhile this MRE, I'm just sort of going to squeeze it about a bit. It's as if you're sort of mixing it about in the sachet really, so the heat spreads around quite evenly. But that's my lamb casserole in there to replace some calories after that paddling and setting up the basher, and just basically doing a bit of activity this afternoon. Now I've stopped moving around, you can sort of sense the breeze a little bit, so I've only got my t-shirt on, so I've just taken out the dry bag, another small dry bag which has got an extra vest and a long sleeve shirt in there, and then just in this postal bag that I've just used as a sort of a compression bag, keeps it nice and tight, is my body warmer. So I'll put that over my shirt and I'll just keep the chill factor off as the breeze reflects across the water, just a little bit in my direction, but it's okay, it's not going to affect my shelter at all. Okay, so you can see I've got the Firebox stove unfolded, and it's in situ with the highest point of my tarp, so there's not really any chance of really me getting smoked out considering the overall size of the flames, and even if there is a little bit of damp wood, which I've just double checked all the wood that I've procured. And as you can see, the wood that I've procured, the way I've sort of set it out, it's just easy to distinguish. There's a sort of kindling there which is going to be basically the bits to get it going. Then there's sort of like second stage, then going the opposite direction from sort of going that way, then that way is what I call the fourth stage wood, which will be later on when the coals are really sort of glowing, and that thicker wood will actually take light and be more appropriate for grilling the chicken. But the main bits of wood that I'll be using are sort of just on this corner here, but I can distinguish by the directions there. It just makes it easier just to view it in, so when you're leaning over to get a bit of wood, especially if it's getting a bit darker, it's just easier to notice and it's more practical. Just my little technique anyway. Fire starting kit in a waterproof box. I've got some Vaseline petroleum jelly impregnated cotton wool pads, as you can see they're the white ones. I've got also some fire starters, sort of eco ones, so I've used those before. So what I do is I'm just going to set light to one of those with the cigarette lighter, nice and easy. Over the past few minutes I just heard a few specks of rain on the tarp. I don't think it's going to be heavy. It's not forecast to be heavy, but it's definitely going to be rain and through to the early hours of the morning here and there. Light sporadic showers, but tomorrow's going to be nice and clear, so hence actually having the firebox stove inside under the tarp in the most vented area. It's obviously not going to go out due to any little rainfall we have. So the fire starter's ignited and now ready to put some of the smaller kindling on. So the kindling now is just ready to take. Put a little bit more. If it does go down a little bit, then what I'll do is I'll just put in one of the Vaseline cotton wall pads. I don't want to be doing anything too sort of camp crafty. Just want to do it as economical time as possible. Not really much smoke, and there is no problem at all with any of the heat affecting the plasti tarp. I could even probably have a small little campfire underneath here and it still wouldn't melt it, and that's from previous experience. Yeah, you might get the odd cinder, but from my experience of using plastic tarps, just nice and cheap and cheerful for a fire pit shelter, I've never ever had any problems with them. So as far as my basher being combustible from the firebox, it ain't gonna happen. Good morning. That view a little bit earlier on to my right with the sun cascading onto the basher was about 6:30 this morning, so that was really nice. I fancied a brew, so I knocked one up on the Hexi stove. So I had a nice hot drink and then sort of dozed off and then woke up again a couple of hours ago. And when I initially woke up the second time, not long ago, I heard some splashing, which I thought was paddling, and just out there was a free swimmer. Looked like a guy had a skull cap on, paddling along, or should I say, yeah, well, swimming, paddling along, with a high-vis orange dry bag in tow behind him. He wasn't swimming obviously that fast, because the bag looked, I don't know, it looked about, I don't know, maybe about sort of 30 to 40 litres, and it was sort of quite, it seemed inflated a little bit as well with whatever kit, obviously his clothes, and there was a bit of a drag on it, so he must have been very, very strong to have been paddling, towing that bag behind him. I've seen it on telly before, but I've not actually seen it in real life, so that was interesting to actually be welcomed by the splashing of a free swimmer going past my pitch this morning. The tarp held up well last night. There was a little bit of breeze, but I knew this particular spot is not really a real turbulent wind trap. But if it had have kicked up any more than what it was, then I'd have just lowered the configuration like normal, kept the same shape, and just lowered it down. But you can see on my legs, I've got my waterproof jacket, simply as an extra layer because I didn't bring my sleeping bag, just my softy jacket and trousers. So I was otherwise very, very warm and comfortable, and that just made the difference, just having that draped over the top. So, good job done. And if I don't describe it, I'll always get inquiries, especially if you're a newbie to the channel or not seen how I've done sleep kit before. But initially, I just had my original t-shirt that I've had on all day yesterday. Then what's classed as actually a tropical jacket, it's actually a cotton with just a very few synthetic fibres. It dries easily. It's an army issue tropical shirt jacket as it's classified. And I dyed it black just to get rid of the tones of the sort of military look. And then of course over the top of that was the body warmer I had on last night, which was really, really a good thermal layer, really made me comfortable. And of course a jacket over the top. And under the thermal softy trousers, just unzip the leg, easy to get on and off, is my army issue MTP cargo lightweight quick dry trousers. But I dyed these also black as well, just to get rid of the sort of military tones to it, so they're still nice and drab, the desired effect with this sort of camo pattern, but less sort of military looking when you've got a load of kit of this sort on your person. When you're wearing that sort of kit, you know, this shirt included, without looking too sort of military. So the look to the clothing is still somewhat sort of urban domestic, but at least, you know, if it's appropriate and in your needs, blends into the environment of where you actually are outdoors. Plus as well, you know that it's good quality kit that isn't really going to fail you. Normally I'll keep my shoes or boots on, laces slightly loosened, just so you've got a bit of sort of breathing space, a bit more comfortable when you lie down and you're ready to sleep. I keep the shoes on, footwear on, in case I need to get up impromptu for any particular reason at night. I don't like being socked or bed socks. And I do air my feet now and then, take my feet out, just give them an air. But night time, sleep time, I like to keep footwear on in case I have to get at an atom for any reason. So that was my sleep space for the night, on top of 2 of these self-inflating mattresses, 1.2 metres. And in relation to the tarp last night, especially when the weather was going to be a bit unpredictable, brought all bits of kit underneath so it all stayed protected. And of course in easy access and within a position where I wouldn't want to get out of that side of the tarp if I needed to. Safest and most practical is just this side here, plenty of space for manoeuvrability all the way around. Or of course to the left hand side of the upright sectional pole at the front. All fire lighting and fire kit paraphernalia at the front edge, which is then easily manoeuvrable back. But you notice that the small plasti tarp, it's only about 6 foot by 3 foot, was sort of folded up with the wood inside it. Okay, so I know it's mixed it up from previous, but by just keeping it on the plastic sheet you can actually drag it, move it around wherever you want to. Plus as well, if it did have to stay outside for whatever uncalculated reason, then you can cover it up and it will stay dry. I'm going to partially deflate both of them so then I can actually fold them in half and then have that sort of as a sit area if I did actually want to sit on the floor for any reason when I'm actually accessing any kit or anything like that. But of course I've got the folding stool as well when I'm doing things more active. Now ready to get that going and to make some brunchy breakfast. And before I start all that and get access to some of the food, I'm just going to have a quick freshen up with some wet wipes. Yeah, these will do the job rather than having a sort of a water, flannel and soap body wash. So I'll be using a few of those. So that was hands, face, neck, everything above sort of collar level. Job done. So the grill plate that I used to do the chicken over the Firebox last night, I'm just scraping off the worst of the sort of like burnt, it's really sauces and skin really, residue. Taking care obviously because it's on my foot, so I don't want to slice my foot or ankle, so I'm doing it at just the right level. So I've taken the worst off, so there'll be least amount of flavouring on the peshwari naans that I'm going to toast over the top. Here's the heavy duty sharpening file that I use for this machete. This is especially for lawnmower blades and things like that. So safety first, that always goes in the sheath with the machete, and when you finish with it, don't leave it lying around. If you're going to leave it for any period of time, whether it's just a few seconds, resheath it so it's safe. Even if I was just going to potter around for about half a minute, it's going back in there, then when I use it I'll take it out again. So what have we got for brunch? Buttered, toasted peshwari naans, eggs and a tin of beans with their pork sausages. Didn't bring any plates, I didn't really need or want one, so what I'm going to use, I'm going to use my open knife nice and sharp just to cut round part of this packaging that the little naan breads came in, just as a protective surface to actually place them on once they're toasted. Which, as you can see, really does the job. So I'm going to do a two-in-one. First one is I'm going to cook the food in the saucepan on the Firebox, but at the same time I've got the kettle on the brew on the Hexi stove. So there we have it, yumminess in a saucepan. Not exactly the best of sort of presentations or sort of eating technique, all out the saucepan, but it's the most practical way, and I know it's going to taste good. Yummy. Spot on. Okay, I'll explain a little bit more in depth the configuration of the tarp, the shelter, the reasons why I returned here to actually try it out, considering the two rear uprights and the sort of footprint I had to actually have the configuration that I had in my mind before actually structuring it when I was at home. The first two fixings with a bungee was my head end on those little sapling trees, and then to get the stability and striation to make the rest of the connections, I corded out the centre line, and then obviously either side was quite loose, and then just started to bring the basher poles out either side, then these corners, and then just sort of readjusted it, tweaked it a few times, might have had to take the pegs out, rearrange them so I could get all the angles so everything was at the right striation. So you've got, as I shake, you've got the stability. The approximate midpoint of the tarp, sort of like lengthwise, coming widthways midpoint, the two extendable basher poles, I've virtually got them to their fullest extension either side. The broadside aspect of entrance, and then of course then the other side, I've got the other basher pole, which I would only sort of want to enter that side as a last resort, because obviously it's not as open. And there you can see is the rear corner head end, the small little sapling tree where the bungee is connected on that corner, and of course comes across here to that one. I specifically didn't want it in the far corner. Obviously this wasn't wide enough anyway, hence that's why I wanted to utilise this space. So there was a little bit of a fall coming down here either side, and from the inside view is the other corner coming down at an angle, bungeed, whereby internally you can see where the fixings are to the upright of those small little sapling trees. Gives me enough width to be central where my sleep space was, and you can see I deflated the two mats to make more of a sort of a inclined sitting area, and then also it enabled me to have my kit along this broadside to my right. So in relation to the two end fixings on the sapling tree uprights, compared to the wider aspect from one extendable basher pole to the other, this makes the point here where there's a slight fall to this slightly broader aspect. This sort of shape of the footprint is more practical and also away from any downpour of rain. So the widest part to the other side also gives me more floor space on this edge. Once I've sort of sat up, then either side of me from a sitting position is more of a wider space, which is really practical for being underneath the shelter. And then from the forward point of the two basher poles brings us to the sectional pole. When I originally acquired the sectional poles, they were about 18 inches on each section, so what I did, I actually cut about 4 or 5 inches off to make them into just about sort of 12-inch sections, which in turn makes them easier to fit into, say, a Bergen rocket pouch at the side or any sort of smaller pouch. It just makes all that difference. So of course the front end, which is just under 6 foot, enables me to sort of walk in without too much crouching, this being the main entrance. And I've got the sort of triangular incline fall either side from either broadside basher pole to the far end corner, which of course is bungee down. If it had been a sort of a lean-to shelter lengthwise going here and these corners had been up, obviously I'd have had more space here at the front, but then it would have meant that a lot of fall on the water, if it did heavily rain, would also have this surface area at the same of where the apex is, which would then run down, so I'd get more waterfall. So here you've only really got, if there was a heavy downpour, this triangular part here, which then will go down, which makes it just a little bit less water, and then some will go over the edge. But not only are those triangular inverted down corners letting more rainfall go away from the head end, but also it's given me a little bit of a wind break as well. Yep, of course it's going to come in laterally on the broadside, but the main aspect, you know, is a bit of mix and match. There was different aspects to actually get from how I configured this 12x8 tarp, whereby it was as practical and useful the way that I actually wanted to create it for this sort of circumstance, the two back uprights as I mentioned just previously, to have this sort of configuration. And the position of the canoe stored in the most practical and safe place also was a bit of a windbreak and protection at my head end. But if the wind had kicked up, it did a few times across the water and actually had hit my broadside. But the wind has been changing directions. It comes across this way, then it changes the length of the river as well. Then I would have manoeuvred it and positioned it across here on its angle, hull base side out, sitting area open side in, and I'd have had the actual edge of the gunnel resting on that board, which I've explained before is a transom bench. Also I use it as the base to put on the trolley to actually transit the canoe when it's folded up, deflated, but also I can actually use it as a wedge to actually lean the canoe onto. So that's what I would have done in broadside windy conditions. All the fixing attachments, if not of those two trees at the back, were all down to the ground via bungees and spiked into the ground, and the only one that was paracord was making it a bit longer and a bit more stable, so there was less give, was down to the ground there. And when the wind has actually built up and kicked in a bit into the shelter, it has bellowed, but it's really kept its stability, considering I thought maybe, you know, the bungees might have given a little bit, but I've got the right striation. I always check the bungees before, during and after. A lot of people don't like using bungees. Prefer your traditional paracord or bank line or any other sort of cordage fixings. But you know, I've used bungee cords for many years. Yeah, you know, you've got to be careful. But the more you practice with them, the more you set up shelters and know how to use them. There are maybe certain occasions, depending on the type of terrain, that I might actually use paracord or similar rather than bungees. But remembering that, you know, if there's too much tension and the breeze kicks up, if there's not any give, it could maybe sort of damage the fixings. And the beauty of the bungees and their practicality, they're really quick, they're instant. And considering, you know, it was going to be prospect to rain, I didn't want to be sort of like faffing around with special types of knots and all that sort of thing. I just wanted to get the shelter up. And from using them many times before, it's just habit. I know what to do. So normally, whenever I'm sort of planning to go out and do some outdoors activities, I'll always check the weather. Obviously it's a good practice to do via the Met Office website and app. I've got it on the phone and also on my internet connection on my computer, and find that they're really up to date. I was going to leave first thing yesterday morning, really early, at the crack of dawn, but then because the weather was destined to be just a little bit wet, and then there's supposed to be a thunderstorm any time from around about midday to about early afternoon, I then thought, well, if I was out for a few days, I don't mind, you know, the challenge. It's good exercise of being out in bad weather and actually coping with that and contending with it, making sure you've got the right waterproofs, protecting your kit, and also putting a shelter up in the rain, which I've done many times before. But for me, the objective wasn't the challenge of, you know, practicing particular aspect skills of, you know, all terrains, all weathers. I knew I just wanted to come out for a bit of a chill out zone. What I wanted to do, set up the tarp in this configuration at this location. That was the main priority, and use the Firebox stove, which I've not used for quite a long time. There is a full review I did a couple of years ago when I did a stealth camp, and what I'll do is I'll put the link to that video on the bottom of this video in the description box. So the main aspect was actually just getting here, main thing, having time to put up the shelter, enjoy being outdoors, enjoying some of the more clement weather that we started to have after that bit of downpour. But just before I arrived, I had all my waterproofs ready. I had my waterproof trousers on over these trousers. I have a waterproof jacket which I put over myself when I was asleep last night, and that was easily accessible. But it was the last, I suppose, 500 metres, all of a sudden it was very light rain, but it was quite nice because it was actually breaking through the blue sky. So recce in the weather, fitting it in where I actually left a little bit later, although I arrived at put-in under the tree when I inflated the canoe. It had just finished a little bit of thunder and lightning. It was more thunder and lightning was in the distance. So arriving at put-in, I timed it so that I could inflate the canoe, and when the bad weather had sort of passed over, I then thought, right, at least it's going to be practical for me to arrive dry, albeit there was just a little bit of a shower the last 500 metres. I didn't really get that wet at all, but I knew that it was a short journey to actually eventually get to where I was going to moor up and be here. So I literally timed it around the weather to be most practical to transit and canoe in the waters. Use the Firebox stove. Share the experience with you on another solo canoe camp. It's getting on for late afternoon. What I was going to do on the Firebox was pre-cooked, so it would be quite convenient to do. Pre-cooked sliced beef in gravy, long life in a tin. And then also Greek style runner green beans in tomato sauce. I was going to chop up and cube some pre-washed new potatoes, boil those first, and then add those in to heat up in the faithful saucepan. I've got enough wood and I could procure some more, but I don't really fancy actually lighting up the Firebox stove because it will extend the time out for a little bit longer, and I do actually want to get back in the daylight. So if I do get a bit peckish, I'm still quite full after that brunch from previous, the eggs and the beans and that. So if I do get a little bit peckish, then I'll have the tuna salad with rice, and there's sort of, that's long life. Just eat that straight out the tub and add those sardines in tomato sauce. That's if I feel a bit hungry, but I'll probably make a brew before I go. But I'll save that one for another time, that's for sure. So I'm just chillaxing on me deflated sleep mat backrest. I did actually bring my chill zone hammock with me, but I've decided to sort of like chill out on the ground for the time being, and I'll probably make a brew in a little while and just hear the breeze once again, as I usually do, just rustling through the crown of the trees. So yeah, all in all, it's been a good just over 24 hours. So final little bit of food drink activity on this canoe wild camp is just making a final brew on the hexie. Bit of a windbreak there using the top of the stick table and my dry bag. It's far enough away not to get affected by the flames. Tea bag is in there with some sugar and the long life milk, evaporated milk and a biscuit. So final little refreshment on this lovely, what's becoming a bit breezy but sunny afternoon. Okay, so I've walked about 400 metres from my pitch along the other side of the bank, and not exactly leave no trace by whoever was here previously. I have camped around this area before, but when I was here last time and I came for a walk, this wasn't here. So this has been established over the past 3 to 4 weeks. Can't even take the plastic bottle with them. And that's besides young trees, anything from 3 to 6 inch diameter trunks have been cut down. Some old wood obviously has been foraged and procured for the fire. There is a sort of unspoken code of courtesy on the waters, whereby if you've previously moored up on the bank, and sometime the narrowboat dwellers riverboat people, even people with launches that know sort of the riverway code really. If you use wood, sometimes you'll replace it, but it's put back in a nice tidy pile, ready for the next person, which is a sort of common courtesy, but it seems to be that sort of little code of conduct seems to be being lost nowadays. Plus on passing, some trees have got graffiti, obviously with some sort of spray paint, so for these people to make their mark. And you know, if I'm sort of camping nearby and they pitched up, the same people or people similar, while I was actually here, you know, sort of safety, proxemics, knowing your area, who's around, you know, just something to consider really. And as you can see from my pitch, as I've now cleared up, there's a little bit of dusty earth, but nothing once the rain's fallen that you'll have known I was ever here. So now it's coming up to about 8 o'clock in the evening, and I'm ready to embark on my journey back to put in the canoe. So I'm ready for the off now to paddle back to put in, with the sun going to be on my broadside. And anyway, it's been a good just over 24 hours, and thanks for joining us yet again on another canoe wild camp. I hope you deemed some new ideas from the purpose and reason why I came out this weekend. So as always, thanks for watching, and really appreciate your interest, and catch you in another video soon. Cheers, take care.